Welcome to the Dusty Jobs podcast from Imperial Systems. Industry knowledge to make your job easier and safer.
Thanks for joining us again for the Dusty Jobs podcast. This is Donovan Karkai, the host. Today joining me is Jeremiah Wann. Jeremiah, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. We're here at Imperial headquarters in Mercer again today. And Jeremiah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm the owner and CEO of Imperial Systems. Started the company about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And this is my first podcast with Imperial Systems.
There
it's
you go.
Fun. Yeah. The Dusty Jobs.
We're glad to have you on. So today what we're going to be talking about is a little bit of your history, a little bit of the industry history, and at the end we're going to talk about where we think things are going.
Right.
So tell us, Jeremiah, what makes you qualified to tell us anything about dust collector history? I mean, other than you're the owner of the company, but what's your history that kind of gives you?
Yeah, I never really thought about it as being qualified, but I guess my a little bit about my background is that I kind of got into this a little bit different than most people, So I grew up in this industry. I'm third generation would be, I guess, third generation dust collection.
Yeah.
Guy, sheet metal guy is what we were originally, but my grandfather started back in, I don't even know what year, but he started back right out of the Army, out of World War II,
Wow.
doing sheet metal work in cereal mills. And, about the time my dad and my uncle were probably 17 years old, they started getting involved with the sheet metal shop there in LaPel, Indiana. And so that's kind of a little bit about the history to that point. I guess shortly after that, right out of college, I contacted my dad and said, hey, I'd like to go to work for you. And he was at the time, a manufacturer's rep. So like we have reps today here.
Yeah.
He was representing another brand dust collector. And at the time, I wanted to work with him. So,
So then you came on as a rep too?
Essentially, yeah. Yeah, right away. Yeah.
So when you're a rep, what all did that entail? What did you have to do?
Well, I mean, so, the first thing he wanted to do with me was, to teach me AutoCAD and to teach me air systems and how to design them. So I learned airflow, static pressures, can velocities, internal velocities, all these things that we talk about today. And here in the walls, this boring stuff that we talk about. But it's, it's been my life for 20 plus years, professionally.
Yeah.
And then, like I said before that, growing up in a sheet metal shop from the time I can remember, it's just kind of ingrained in me.
Man, that had to be some real valuable knowledge you gained growing up, just being able to be in there with your grandpa, with your dad, seeing how everything's built, and then being able to go out. You probably have such a better understanding of how a system goes together when you've been the guy who's helped build it.
I think so. I mean, I still, I have people come to me a lot and, ask me for, advice on different things, on systems or on equipment design. And today, I'm still very, very involved in, R&D and coming up with new products. And it's not just the way I was brought up, but it's also just our daily experience around here. So yeah, it all helps for sure.
Man, well, I know you said you didn't ever think of yourself as qualified, but I think you're more than qualified to give us some information about this topic. So that's about you. Now, so you were a rep with your dad. Now, how did you get into building your own collector and just starting this company? How did that even come about?
Sure. Well, so kind of, again, my background before that was, growing up in sheet metal. So I understood, we built ductwork and cyclones and bag houses and that kind of stuff. But we worked together for about 3 years, and I don't know if you ever saw Orange County Choppers, but the old show, I don't think it's on anymore. But when that show came out, I'm like, wow, my dad and I could have done this same thing. So I love them to pieces, and today Thanksgivings are a lot better than they used to be. I can say that, but it's one of those things where kind of a bold-headed person, and I definitely like to do things my way a little bit, and I think he's kind of the same way. So we didn't work together too well when we were in business together, but certainly we do on a day-to-day basis now. But that being said, a few years after I started working with him, I started my own company at that point, went to rep another line of equipment, and we, at that time still representing a company called Crestwood Recycling, who makes wood shredders.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of an odd twist, but did a lot in the shredder industry,
Yeah.
which helps today a lot because, we're talking about conveying materials and stuff. And so I had that experience. But, when I got out, a little bit of the history of that is if you remember, that was in 2001. So got married in, August 2001. So, the times were different back then, right?
Yeah.
We had the attacks in September.
Right.
And, just started the business. And so, I fought for about...
So we had September 11th, you
Yeah.
got married,
Yeah.
and you said, why not just start a business too?
And bought a house in the mix, too.
Oh,
So
man,
it was like,
you went all in.
Yeah, man. Start with my back against the wall. That's what I like to say.
There you go.
So, being a fighter and, that worked out well for me.
Yeah.
Kind of pushed me. But getting into the business, during those days, kind of got out thinking that I was going to be able to set the world on fire and start making, all kinds of sales right away. And of course, with the attacks, you couldn't get somebody on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was pretty tied up with everything else that was going on. So, within a couple years, basically said to my new wife at the time, I said, we newly married at the time, but I said, we really, in order to survive, I feel like we're really going to need to start making some stuff. So
Okay.
I said, why don't we, I knew how to make ductwork and cyclones, and I knew design. So I said, why don't we start, we'll buy some machinery and start building some stuff. So the kind of the way it started out is, it was kind of funny because I, working from home for a while, I was always big on when I worked from home, I still got dressed up like I was going to work.
Yeah,
And, that's it's just a mentality thing. And, I would basically get dressed for office work during the day and, work 8-10 hours. And then at night, I'd go, roll ductwork and weld ductwork all night. And I literally did that for about a year. And, I would do that till 2:00 in the morning and get up and do it all over again.
Wow.
And so, so she would bring me dinner and whatever, and we would do that. So finally, after I just about collapsed, I said, I got to hire somebody now that I can afford one person. And, so I mean, it's, it's the great American story, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And your first employee is still with us today, right?
Pretty close to the first employee. I had a few in between there, but yeah, Russ Ryland, he's our service manager.
Yeah.
And yeah, you bet he's still here. He's been here since I'd have to ask Russ how many years, but I want to say it's 17 years. Probably.
Yeah, he has quite a history and a wealth of knowledge in the industry too.
We could probably do a podcast on Russ.
We'll have Russ on. We will. He'll be on at some point. So in the industry. Now let's go. Now we got a little bit of history how you got started. Yeah. So in the industry, how do you see things from where they were, in 2000 to where they are today? What's a big shift? I know for you, some things have shifted. How did that all come around?
Well, when I first got into the business, I mean, I've done, even at the time, did carbon black projects, did mining projects, did. Just a lot of different industries, but to be honest with you, our focus was really in the wood industry.
Okay.
I mean, we did a lot of the big furniture companies, the big MDF and particle board type furniture companies. And prior to 2008, that was a pretty big industry in our country.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of change for me as far as that goes. For us in 2008, we decided that we were going to run as hard as we could from marketing to that industry.
Yeah.
Now, we never left our customers or we never ran away from our base.
Right.
But we certainly said, what, all of our marketing dollars going forward are going to be in, manufacturing. It was kind of the area we picked.
Shift the focus.
Yeah. So, I mean, even to this day, the majority of our focus is in manufacturing and metalworking.
Right. So when in that shift of focus, that was a shift of product too, right? Here at Imperial. So that's where you guys started building cartridge collectors, right?
Yeah, about that time. We did, and it was the best move we ever made, to be honest with you. I mean, we at that time we built bag houses, we built cyclones, we built ductwork, we built rotary airlocks. But in order to really everybody's story is different, and I realize that, everybody's business is unique to their own needs and the way they've designed it. But the way we were headed, I mean, we were still representing another brand at the time, Cartridge Collector line. And, for us to really, to do a global footprint that I had envisioned, that was the only way really to go forward to start building one ourselves.
Yeah. So when you go from building bag houses, wood dust industry, then you shifted into more of a manufacturing,
Right.
welding. What do you see the big differences between what welding and shops were like then
Right.
to what they're like today? I mean, you've been watching the industry for 20 years now.
Right.
In your history, what do you see?
Well, I mean, the big difference with the shops back in the day versus the shops today, I mean, we can go way back. I talked about my granddad earlier, and not to take anything from him at all. This isn't a knock, but I've heard stories back in back in the 60s and 70s where they were they have 20, 30 people piled up in a small shop, and they're stepping on extension cords and leaders for welders, and just never really cleaned up too much because the focus, kind of the old school focus, was get the work out the door at all costs.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know that even from labor today.
Right.
Guys used to work 16 hours all the time. It was no big deal. But
Right.
so fast forward a little bit. And shops are just a lot cleaner. They're safer. Are more organized. Now I'm gonna say, to clear the air on that too. I mean, he runs a shop in Texas today, like I said, and it's very clean and very orderly. So he's doing good.
Well, and there you go. That's a guy who's been running a shop his whole life, and even within his own business, it's shifted to becoming a more cleaner shop.
Right. Well, everybody has.
Everybody
right?
has.
Everybody has, and I think that you and I were talking earlier, and I think that a lot of it is the focus has changed a lot to obviously the customer. You want the customer, when you invite the customer in, you want them to see you have a nice, orderly, clean environment. I think that's important, but probably more important than that is that when your employees come to work every day. And I tell our people here all the time, I say, we spend more time with each other than we do our own families. So
Yep.
Essentially we're family, and we need to act like it. So we need to clean up after each other. We need to have a nice, neat place to come to work every day. But on top of that, if you're trying to hire new people, and today is obviously the economy is booming today.
Yep.
And potential employees are interviewing you almost as much as you're interviewing them, right? So they come in and they want to see kind of where they're going to be working, and so we're very happy and very proud of the fact that we run that type of organization here. It's very clean and very orderly.
Yeah, I can imagine if you have an interview with two people and you walk through one shop and it's clean, it looks well, and you walk through another one and it's got a haze through the whole thing, it kind of be an easy pick to know
Right.
which place you want to go
Right.
work at.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a lot of the industry.
Yeah.
Across the board, people are trying to find good people to work, and they want to keep their shop clean.
Right.
And not only does that help keep the shop clean, reduce risk, reduce time
Right.
on cleanup around
Well,
the shop.
I think that's the point is that our air systems today, that's one of the things they do. Not only does it make it safer from an NFPA and an OSHA standpoint, but it also you have less cleanup time, right?
Yeah.
So you walk through a plant that has adequate dust collection or fume collection, and then it's just much cleaner. So you're not spending all those hours sweeping up after yourselves and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So funny story was today I was walking up here to do this podcast, and one of the guys came by and said, hey, could we program our I have an idea. And I said, well, what is it? Because we love ideas here. Help. What can we do to make our environment better? And so he said, well, could we set the dust collector to where this is an ambient style system, so it's basically just ductwork above weld cells.
Yeah.
And so he said, can we just set it to where when we hit stop, it has a 30-minute delay? And I said, sure. Why would we do that? Because in the back of my mind, dust collection guy, I'm thinking that's like an offline cleaning thing or whatever to help the filters. But no, his idea was that 30 minutes after we leave, it's still kind of pulling that smoke out of the air, whatever's left up there, which isn't much, but that eventually settles down and lays on their table in the morning. Because he said, when I come back in the morning, that thing gets shut right off. And he said, there's a little bit of dust back on my work table.
Yeah.
So it was just a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
back in the day, they wouldn't even have noticed that their desk was dirty because it was still dirty from the day before. I mean, that's
right,
the big difference
Yeah.
between shops now and then.
Yeah, we're kind of picky around here.
So. So that's where we're at. The industry's kind of come a long way since from where it was to where it is now. Better standards, better, and I can only imagine where the future's going.
Right.
We're probably, I know government standards are coming up. There's some things that are coming down that are going to force some people to have a cleaner environment. But in general, I think people are interested in having a cleaner environment, not just in their shop, but also what they're pumping outside.
Right.
But what do you see the future of where the industry's going and where dust collection's going?
Well, I think it's getting better. You're going to see it in more and more plants around the country. I mean, obviously we have the government, which we have OSHA, kind of dictating, what we're using this for, and which I think it's all for the better, right? I mean, it's it helps, it saves lives, and so I think that's good. I like all the standards I'm hearing that are coming out. I think it's good. As far as the future goes, I mean, today, we're seeing, obviously robotic weld cells are taking off. I mean, robotic for manufacturing in general is big. So, we're doing more and more with that type of stuff. I think localized filtration is important too. So like where before we used to just do big ambient systems for the whole plant, and I think that's great and it has its place. But just sending an email to a guy that has a manufacturing shop out west and kind of talking about the pros and cons of the different styles. And one of the things we really like and we have in our plant is smaller ambient systems that are more modular. Yeah,
we were. I had the opportunity to walk through a facility the other day, and they were looking at that, and they were also looking at their robotic cells, where when they get a new line in or they get a new contract, sometimes they have to shift that whole facility.
Right.
And I think that's a little bit of what people are looking for: the flexibility within a system.
Oh, and, absolutely. I mean, if you have a piped in system to where it's all close capture, everything's hooded or flex arms or whatever, we are constantly trying to do improvements around here to speed up production. But if the limiting factor was always, well, we don't want to do that because we don't want to spend money on the ductwork or redesigning the dust collection system, that's very limiting, and we don't do that here. So I think the ambient's much better for that.
Yeah, and when you put in an ambient system, it gives you a little more flexibility over cranes and.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I mean, going back to robots, going back to what's going on, I think sometimes people think robots and they're thinking, man, well, that's going to be, what do you have to worry about that for? Nobody's even going to be around those robots. But you've been in facilities, I've been in facilities where there's someone there, right there beside it, checking it out, and they're also, that's a big investment people are making. So.
Yeah, I get a kick out of that. I always hear people, robots sound scary, so they're going to take over and take our jobs. Yeah. It's funny because I think sometimes it's 2-to-1 sometimes. You got two guys operating a robot versus, but the idea is that it's consistent, that you're less chance of failure with welds, with fit parts, with precision. So I think it's making things better overall.
Yeah, and I mean, from what I'm reading, what I'm seeing, it does seem like more automation is probably where the future's going in a lot of the industry.
Oh, absolutely. And we're trying to. I mean, we're trying to do that here. Do it with fixtures and really kind of honing in our process to make sure that that we can repeat the same product over and over and over. And especially if one guy doesn't show up one day, the next guy can come in. He has the procedures all written. He knows what to do. The fixtures are there. He can't really mess it up.
Right.
So
yeah. Well, that's thanks for sharing with us about your history and where you've been, and kind of getting a little bit of a thought of where we're going to go here.
Sure.
And you guys who are listening, just so you know, as these challenges come up, as things come up, we've been doing this for a long time. We're going to keep doing it in the future. And so when you have questions, feel free to contact us. Give us a call. We have a lot of products on our website. I'll do a little plug here for us about that can help handle all these issues. And if you have more questions, feel free to email into the podcast. It's dustyjobspodcast@isystemsweb.com. look for us on Twitter, LinkedIn, see us on all the social media sites, and let us know what you guys would like to hear about. Jeremiah will be joining us more. He's glad to answer any questions you might have. He's got a wealth of knowledge, experience. So thanks for joining us. Jeremiah, you got any closers here to say?
No, I'm excited about this. I'm happy to be on the second one or third one. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to roll out, but it's exciting, and looking forward to seeing what comes out of it.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll hear you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Dusty Jobs podcast. Breathe better, work safer.